The Galactic Assembly had always been a gathering of the most advanced and powerful species in the known universe. For millennia, it had been a place where decisions were made, treaties signed, and the fates of entire systems decided with the stroke of a pen or the hum of a council member's voice. The member species, each ancient and technologically superior, operated under the belief that they were the pinnacle of existence. Nothing could challenge their dominance. Nothing could upset their careful balance of power. The thought of a young, rebellious species from a remote planet, a planet called Earth, ever daring to challenge their collective supremacy was unthinkable. But Earth, as it turned out, was done being silent. The galaxy had long dismissed humanity as a primitive species, a relatively young race compared to the ancient civilizations that had long inhabited the stars. For centuries, Earth had remained under the radar, progressing slowly, quietly. Humanity was a fledgling, learning how to master the tools of survival, creating technology and culture while working its way through violent history. They were a species of wars, of strife, of division, and yet they had survived. And that, in the eyes of the galaxy, was their greatest crime, Earth's ability to endure and grow despite all the odds. Then one day it changed. A sudden broadcast, unfathomable to the Assembly, ripped through every communication channel in the galaxy. The signal was unmistakably human, but the message was clear, and it struck a nerve. Earth had declared war, not just on a single species, not even on a single star system, but on the entire galaxy. The transmission was received everywhere at once, an unexpected wave that carried the weight of a single message, an ultimatum. Humanity has decided. We are no longer your subjects, your experiment, or your playthings. We declare war on the galaxy. No one is prepared for us. The transmission, though brief, was like a strike to the heart. No formal declaration of war, no explanation, just the raw assertion of defiance. The message was as bold as it was incomprehensible. Who did humanity think they were to challenge the might of the Galactic Council? Who gave them the right to believe they could defy millennia of galactic order? The reaction from the galaxy was immediate, and at first, filled with disbelief. The representatives of the council were stunned. Among them were the Arcthassians, a species of telepathic giants who had been a part of the Assembly for over 5,000 years. There were the Vorians, whose molecular manipulation technology had allowed them to terraform entire planets. The Quesilin, whose interdimensional travel abilities had placed them far beyond the reach of any conventional war. All these species were ancient, powerful, and they believed they had seen everything. But Earth's transmission was different. "We can't just ignore this," said Arwael, the High Counselor of the Arcthassians, his voice low and contemplative as his massive telepathic presence rippled through the council chamber. "You're right," replied Andrina, the leader of the Vorian delegation. "They've breached the galactic protocols. We must act." But as the council members discussed their next steps, Earth continued its broadcast, growing louder with every passing hour. A second message had gone out, showing humanity's greatest weapon, a fleet of ships, each one far more advanced than anyone could have imagined. Every vessel was equipped with technology previously thought impossible for the human race to possess. Cloaking devices, weapons capable of ripping through starships like paper, and most disturbing of all, an intricate, self-replicating machine system capable of building entire fleets from nothing. In the eyes of the galaxy, Earth had never been capable of creating such sophisticated technology. The entire Assembly had assumed the humans were still stumbling through space travel with primitive, unsophisticated ships. Yet, in reality, humanity had spent decades secretly developing its military infrastructure, using technology scavenged from alien wreckage, reverse-engineered to create the perfect fighting force. And as the transmission continued, humanity's voice grew more confident. "We know your weaknesses. We know your fears. And we know that, together, you cannot stop us." A cold silence hung in the council chamber. For the first time in their history, the galaxy was not united against a single enemy. It was united in disbelief. Who had given humanity such strength? How had they managed to hide so much from the galaxy for so long? The question echoed in every corner of the assembly, but it was clear. Earth had sparked something that no one was prepared for. An unstoppable force was now coming their way. And, as the galaxy scrambled to understand what had just happened, humanity's ships began to move toward the heart of the galaxy, toward the assembly itself. The war had begun. The galaxy's great powers had long prided themselves on their technological supremacy, their unparalleled control over the universe. They had waged wars, quashed rebellions, and imposed their will on countless civilizations. But now, in the face of an unexpected declaration, their calm was shattered, replaced by a sense of impending doom. No one had prepared for this. No one had seen Earth coming. The first assault came just a few weeks after the broadcast. The galaxy had scrambled to deploy its greatest fleets, mobilizing all available forces to neutralize the human threat. But no one, not even the most paranoid analysts, could have predicted how quickly and decisively Earth would strike. It started with a flash, a blinding, brilliant streak across the starry expanse of the galaxy. The Arcthassians were the first to encounter it, a fleet of sleek, dark ships, moving at impossible speeds, cutting through the void like shadows. Their stealth technology was so advanced that the Arcthassian warships didn't even know the humans were there until it was too late. The first blast hit without warning, a particle beam that tore through an entire Arcthassian dreadnought in a single, clean strike, turning it to molten scrap in an instant. "We've been blind," Ryl, the High Counselor, thought grimly. He had been one of the first to dismiss Earth's threat, but now, facing the destruction of his fleet, he felt a deep, unshakable fear. How had they done this? The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each one was constructed with nanotechnology, so sophisticated that it seemed as though they were alive, constantly shifting, adapting, and repairing themselves faster than any opponent could target them. Their weapons were equally terrifying, capable of cutting through shields and armor with ease. But it wasn't just their technology that made them dangerous. It was their unpredictability. The humans, it seemed, had no rules. They didn't fight like any other species. As the humans attacked, their tactics were savage. No one had anticipated the chaos they would bring with them. In battle, the humans didn't follow the orderly principles of galactic warfare. They unleashed everything, every weapon at their disposal, with no restraint. They tore through the Arcthassian fleet like a storm, their ships relentlessly striking with precision, leaving only destruction in their wake. The Vorian fleets, with their ability to manipulate molecules and alter the very fabric of reality, were next. But the humans were already one step ahead. They had figured out a way to jam Vorian molecular manipulators, rendering them useless in battle. At first, the Vorian ships fought back fiercely, warping reality itself to create weapons that could shatter planets. But humanity's ships, swarming in numbers, overwhelmed them. The Vorian fleet was decimated in a matter of hours. News of the attacks spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Panic spread like wildfire. In the outer systems, entire colonies had already begun to feel the shock waves of Earth's assault. Panic had set in, with entire populations fleeing towards safer regions of the galaxy. Those who remained behind sent desperate distress calls to the Council, but Earth ships had already disabled most of the major communication relays, cutting off all means of coordination between the various galactic powers. "The humans are coming," said Andrina, the Vorian leader, her voice tight with fear. "They've disabled our most advanced fleets. What will we do?" "We fight," replied Ryl, his massive frame shaking with anger and something else, uncertainty. "We have no choice." But the galaxy's response was not as coordinated as it once had been. Factions began to fracture and mistrust spread. The Quesilin, a race with vast control over interdimensional travel, had already begun to withdraw, retreating to safer realms beyond the reach of any conventional attack. Their ability to move between dimensions made them an enigma. Their fleet remained largely absent from the galaxy-wide battles, causing a great deal of unrest among the other species. No one knew if they would come to the aid of the Council, or if they were waiting for a better opportunity to make their own play. The humans, meanwhile, did not slow down. They were relentless. Their fleet advanced toward the heart of the galaxy, toward the assembly itself. But they were not content with simply attacking. They sought something more. There was a specific target in mind, and it was something no one had expected. The central node of the Galactic Assembly's communications network, the heart of their unity. Once the humans reached the node, the galaxy's ability to communicate was severed. Entire sectors lost contact with each other. Warships drifted aimlessly in the void, their commanders unable to relay orders. The human fleet moved like a tidal wave, sweeping aside anything in their path. By the time the rest of the galaxy had realized the true scope of Earth's ambition, it was too late. The humans were not merely fighting to survive or defend, they were fighting to conquer. They had planned for this, and they had calculated their every move. RYL, Andrina, and the rest of the Council could do little, but watch as Earth's assault continued unabated. The galaxy's most powerful species had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The war was no longer just a declaration. It was a reckoning, and the galaxy had no idea how to stop it. As Earth's fleet continued its relentless march toward the heart of the galaxy, the Assembly's once proud leaders scrambled to formulate a counterattack. They had never anticipated this. For centuries, they had shaped the galaxy's order, maintained balance through diplomacy and might. But now, it seemed as though the very foundation of their power was crumbling. The Galactic Assembly was housed in a vast station, an immense structure located in the neutral zone of the galaxy. Known as the Citadel, it was the nerve center of interspecies communication, the ultimate seat of power, and a symbol of the galaxy's dominance. It was here that the leaders of the Arcthassians, the Vorian, the Quesilin, and others gathered in peace. It was here that decisions were made that shaped the fate of billions. And it was here that Earth's warships were now heading. Commander Lucian Hale, the leader of Earth's forces, stood aboard the bridge of the flagship Righteous Fury. His gaze was fixed on the holoscreen, which displayed the swirling galaxy ahead, the destination clear, the Citadel. His fingers drummed against the armrest of his chair. For years, humanity had toiled in secrecy, building weapons, studying the technologies of fallen civilizations, and preparing for this very moment. The humans had been underestimated by everyone, and now, with their ships reaching the very core of the galaxy, they were poised to make their move. "Commander, we are entering the Citadel's proximity zone," reported a young officer from the navigation console. Lucian nodded, his expression focused. "Maintain formation. I want all ships ready for a full assault the moment we reach the perimeter." It wasn't just the destruction of the Citadel they were after. It was the message. The humans weren't simply fighting for survival. They weren't seeking refuge. This war was about establishing a new order, one where they would no longer be pawns to the will of the ancient species. And the Citadel, with its towering, impregnable walls and advanced defensive systems, was the perfect target. Back on the Citadel, the leaders of the Galactic Assembly were at odds, desperate and fractured. The council chamber buzzed with heated debate as the Arcthassians, the Vorians, and the Quesilin made their case for action. "They're coming. We cannot let them reach the heart of the galaxy," Andrina, the Vorian High Chancellor, argued, her voice cold and calculated. "We must launch a preemptive strike, coordinate our fleets to engage them before they can strike the Citadel itself." "You don't understand." RYL's voice boomed across the chamber, his vast telepathic presence more intense than ever. "We've tried everything. Their ships are unrecognizable. They've crippled our most advanced fleets with ease. They've anticipated every move we've made. We have no hope of defeating them in battle." "But we can't just surrender," cried Jelkra, a Quesilin counselor, her angular form writhing with tension. "We cannot let Earth tear apart everything we've worked for. We must find a way to stop them." The room fell silent as RYL closed his eyes, his mind stretching out toward the approaching enemy. The desperation in the chamber was palpable, but it was RYL's telepathic senses that had the answer, or at least he thought he did. "They're not just attacking the Citadel," RYL said slowly, his thoughts rippling through the chamber. "They're preparing to disable our entire network. They're not just here to win, they're here to end us." The destruction of the Citadel will cripple our entire way of life. If we lose that, we lose everything. A deep sense of dread settled over the chamber. The humans were not merely attacking the physical structure of the Citadel. They were targeting the very essence of galactic unity. If they succeeded, the galaxy would fall into chaos, each faction left to fight alone, isolated without any means of coordination or support. Outside, the fleet of Earthships continued its advance. It had taken only a few short days for humanity to breach the outermost defenses of the Citadel's protective shields. Their ships, with their nanotechnology and self-replicating systems, were formidable and relentless, breaking through the station's outer layers like an unstoppable force. The first wave of fighters from Earth broke through the Citadel's outermost defenses, clashing with the remaining forces of the galaxy's greatest fleets. The battle raged fiercely, but it was clear who held the upper hand. The humans were more than a match for anything the galaxy had sent. Every weapon they deployed, every maneuver, was calculated with precision, as if they were playing a game that no one else knew the rules to. Lucian watched the battle unfold on the holoscreen, his mind focused on the target. As much as they had hoped for a swift victory, he knew the Citadel would be a tougher nut to crack. The defenses were impressive, and the remaining fleets, though disorganized, were desperate. But the humans had already proven they could overcome anything. "Commander," came the voice of his tactical officer, "we've disabled their outer shields. The Citadel is exposed." Lucian's eyes gleamed. "Prepare for the final assault. All units, initiate Phase 2. The humans had anticipated that the Citadel's defense grid would be formidable, but they had studied every flaw, every vulnerability in its design. In just a few hours, the network that connected the heart of the galaxy would be severed. The power of the Galactic Alliance would crumble, and Earth would take its place as the new central force in the universe. As Lucian gave the command, a fleet of human warships launched their final assault. In a single coordinated strike, they would break through the heart of the Citadel. No one could stop them now. And thus, the siege of the galactic heart began in earnest, an assault that would alter the galaxy's future forever. The Citadel's outer defenses had fallen, but the heart of the station, the core systems that governed the entire galaxy's communications and defense networks, still pulsed with power. Humanity's assault was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The galaxy's leaders, fractured by infighting and disbelief, had no unified response left. The desperation in the chamber had reached an all-time high. It was clear. The stakes of this war were no longer just survival, but the very structure of the galaxy itself. In the depths of the Citadel, RYL stood in front of a massive war map, his telepathic mind reaching out, trying to make sense of the chaos. His species' incredible ability to sense the emotions of others had allowed him to gather insights from across the galaxy. But today, even he couldn't escape the raw fear permeating the air. "We're losing," RYL muttered, his words not directed at anyone in particular, but instead a quiet admission of the truth that everyone had been avoiding. His broad, angular face seemed smaller, older, wearier than it had been just weeks before. Andrina, her Vorian form aglow with energy, spoke next, her voice quiet, almost resigned. "We have no choice but to consolidate what's left of our fleets and prepare for the final stand. If we cannot hold the Citadel, we risk total collapse." There was a long silence. Each species in the room knew that if they couldn't maintain control of the Citadel, the vast interconnected web of communications and trade would crumble, and the galaxy would fracture. No one had ever truly imagined such a thing was possible. The Citadel was a symbol of unity. Its loss would make it impossible to coordinate anything between star systems. The Quesselan's interdimensional travel could keep some distant colonies isolated, but it wouldn't stop the inevitable chaos that would follow. Jelkra, the Quesselan representative, was already slipping into the shadows, her eyes flicking back and forth between the leaders in the room. "Do we fight, or do we withdraw?" she asked softly, but the tone of her question was clear. The Quesselan had never been particularly loyal to the galactic cause. They were solitary by nature, not keen on being dragged into a losing battle. RYL's eyes narrowed. "If you retreat, you will be leaving the rest of us to die." What happens to your people then, Jelkra? If humanity does succeed in taking the Citadel, we will be left scattered. No more unity. No more alliances. The Queselan leader hesitated. There was truth in RYL's words, but the fear of loss was real, too. After a tense pause, she spoke. We will not retreat, yet. But do not mistake our hesitation for cowardice. If the Citadel falls, we will do what we must to preserve ourselves. You can no longer expect blind loyalty. It was a statement that hung heavily in the air, and for the first time, the true cracks in the alliance were visible. The galaxy was no longer united in the face of humanity's assault. Trust had eroded. The battle that was unfolding was no longer just about Earth's declaration of war. It was about how each species would survive once the dust had settled. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship Righteous Fury, Lucy and Hale stood before the giant viewport, watching as Earth's ships continued their onslaught. The Citadel was nearly within their grasp. He had fought many battles in his life, but none like this. The tension in his chest tightened with every passing second. Despite his conviction, a part of him could not escape the weight of what this victory would mean. We're on track, Commander, his tactical officer, Lieutenant Mara Kendrick, reported from her station. The final phase will be completed within the hour. The central control core of the Citadel will be ours. No one will be able to communicate or coordinate anything from here on out. Lucien's voice was calm, but carried an edge of something darker. We can't stop. Not now. This war is no longer just about victory. It's about remaking this galaxy in our image. But as the minutes ticked by, the tension on the Righteous Fury began to mount. The human fleet had been unstoppable until now. Yet, something felt off. The silence between Lucien and his officers grew. Then, a voice broke through the quiet. Commander, we have a problem, Kendrick said, her face tight with concern. A small fleet of Queselan ships has entered the sector. They're not engaging, but they've positioned themselves in our path. Lucien's brow furrowed. What do you mean, not engaging? They're watching. Just observing. They're waiting for something. Their ships are cloaked, but we've detected them. A cold realization began to spread through the bridge crew. The Queselan weren't just watching. They were waiting for the right moment to strike, to act. And if they saw Earth's forces as the ultimate threat, they might very well join the fray in unexpected ways. If the Queselan decided to side with anyone, it would tip the balance of power. They think we've gone too far, Lucien murmured. They fear what happens next, but they won't be able to stop us. Yet, his words lacked the confidence they once had. The Queselan might not have engaged in battle, but the ripple effect of their hesitancy was palpable. Earth had made its move. But now the war had become something else entirely. It wasn't just about taking control. It was about whether the galaxy's many factions would adapt, evolve, and accept the reality of a future ruled by humanity. On the Citadel, the final line of defense was beginning to crumble. Earth's ships broke through the last of the shield generators, bypassing the remaining security measures. The Citadel's systems flickered as they were seized by the invaders, and an eerie stillness fell over the chamber of the Galactic Assembly. The moment Earth's forces claimed the heart of the galaxy itself would change forever. The Citadel's control systems fell into human hands, and the balance of power shifted dramatically. And yet, as Lucien Hale looked out into the deep expanse of space, he couldn't shake the growing unease. The galaxy was no longer just a battlefield. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. For humanity, this war was far from over. The true challenge was only just beginning. The fall of the Citadel was not the final victory humanity had hoped for. It was the opening of a door, one that led to a galaxy in turmoil, a galaxy that was no longer united by a common cause, but divided by fear, ambition, and suspicion. The Galactic Assembly had crumbled. But in its place arose a power vacuum so vast that even the conquerors felt the weight of uncertainty. On Earth's flagship Righteous Fury, Lucien Hale paced the command deck, his mind racing. They had taken the Citadel, yes. The central core of the galaxy's communication had fallen under human control. The network that once held the galaxy together was now firmly in their grasp. But as the fleet secured the station and its systems, something began to fester, a subtle sense of unrest among the human officers. No one had prepared them for the ripple effects of their success. "Commander," Lieutenant Kendrick called from the tactical station, her voice urgent. "We've received an encrypted message from Earth. It's from President Hargrave." Lucien paused, his brow furrowing. "Put it through." The transmission flickered to life on the bridge's holoscreen, revealing the stern face of President Hargrave. He looked older, wearier, his eyes heavy with the weight of leadership. "Commander Hale," the president began, his voice steady but laced with something darker. "This victory is only the beginning. I've received reports from several colonies, systems that were loyal to the Assembly and its ideals. There's a growing resistance brewing against the new regime." Lucien's gaze hardened. Resistance? From whom? Hargrave's face tightened. "From those who refuse to accept our dominance. From the species that feel threatened by the changes you've made. The Quesselan, the Vorians, even the Arcthassians are already organizing in secret. They believe this war has gone too far, that Earth has overreached. There are whispers of rebellion, and it's only a matter of time before it spills into open conflict." Lucien felt a chill creep up his spine. "How serious is it?" "Serious enough that we've already begun to fortify Earth's defenses. But this is not just a military issue anymore, Lucien. This is political. The galaxy is on the brink of civil war." The transmission ended, leaving Lucien in the silence of the bridge. His mind raced as he absorbed the weight of Hargrave's words. They had set out to change the galaxy, to rewrite its future, but now they were being pulled into a new war, a war not just for control, but for legitimacy. On the outskirts of the galaxy, hidden in the deep, uncharted sectors, the first sparks of rebellion began to take shape. The once proud members of the Galactic Assembly had begun to meet in secret, their meetings shrouded in shadow and paranoia. The Quesselan, once silent observers, had begun to mobilize. Their leaders, seeing the fall of the Citadel as the first step in Earth's inevitable rise to dominance, began quietly spreading anti-human propaganda among their people. The Quesselan were a nomadic species by nature, but they had a fierce loyalty to their independence. The thought of a human-led galaxy was anathema to their way of life. "We cannot allow this to continue," Jelkra, the Quesselan counselor, said in a secret meeting with her fellow leaders. "The humans are too powerful, too unyielding. Their vision of the galaxy does not leave room for our people. We will not be their vassals. We will strike when the time is right," another leader, Altar, a tall and imposing figure, spoke. "We cannot match their strength head-on, but we can find weaknesses, disrupt their control. If we can break their hold on the communication network, we can divide them. We will use their own fear against them." Jelkra nodded. "There are still enough independent factions out there. The Arcthassians will be of use to us. But we must be careful. We cannot let them know we are planning." Elsewhere, on the remote moon of Veltrion, the remaining Arcthassian fleet commander, Gorlak, stared at the holographic projection of the galaxy, his face contorted in deep thought. "The humans will not stop here. They will crush everything beneath their heel if we don't act. I never believed they had the capacity for this kind of aggression." His second-in-command, Tessa, stood at attention. "Sir, we are ready to join with the other factions. If we don't strike back now, humanity will make us irrelevant. The galaxy will no longer be a place for us to thrive." Gorlak's thoughts flickered briefly to his past. He had once fought alongside the humans during an early encounter on the edges of the galaxy, before the war. They had seemed like a young, naive species back then, too raw to be anything more than cannon fodder. But now, with Earth's ships burning through the stars like a cleansing fire, Gorlak was forced to confront the truth. "The Quesselan are right," he finally said. "We must form an alliance, or we will all be swallowed whole by Earth's ambitions." Back on the righteous fury, Lucien Hale watched as the galaxy began to splinter. News of the growing resistance reached his ears daily now, first whispers, then open reports of skirmishes on the fringes of their control. He had assumed that once they took the Citadel, the galaxy would fall in line. But now, he saw that the war was not over. It had merely shifted to another phase, one where even Earth's leadership faced internal strife. "Commander," Kendrick said, her voice low but urgent, "the Queselan and Arcthassian forces are mobilizing. They've reached out to the Vorians. It looks like they're forming an alliance." Lucien's fist clenched around the command chair's armrest. So it begins. But Lucien knew that even if the galaxy had splintered, Earth's might was still formidable. They had control of the Citadel, the central nerve of galactic communications. And with their unparalleled technology, they could still reshape the galaxy. The question now was how far they were willing to go to keep their newfound power. The war had become a battle not just for control, but for survival. Earth had made its mark on the galaxy, but the true challenge was still ahead. Would humanity hold onto its dominance? Or would the galaxy's fractured factions rise up in rebellion and tear their new order apart? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same. You said. The rebel forces were no longer a distant threat. They were becoming an undeniable force, and the ground was shifting beneath Earth's control. The alliance between the Queselan Arcthassians and Vorians was not just political. It was becoming a war machine, one that was preparing for a full-scale offensive against the newly established human dominion. Lucien Hale had known that the galaxy wouldn't bend easily to Earth's new order, but he hadn't expected the rebellion to gain momentum so quickly. Even with the Citadel under their control, the cracks were beginning to show. The reports were relentless. Insurrections on distant colonies, sabotage to key Earth infrastructure, and covert strikes on Earth's military outposts. The resistance was growing stronger by the day, fueled by a mixture of fear, hatred, and a deep, abiding desire to reclaim the freedom they had lost. On the bridge of the righteous fury, Lucien's mood was somber as he scanned the latest updates. The human fleet, once poised and unified in its mission, was now strained, caught between the pressures of holding a crumbling empire together and fending off increasing attacks. "We've received word from President Hargrave," Lieutenant Kendrick reported, breaking the silence. "There's been another major breach in the Galactian sector. Rebel forces are expanding their operations. It's spreading faster than we anticipated." Lucien's jaw tightened. "How many systems are involved?" "At least 7 now," Kendrick replied. "And we've lost control of 2 entire outer colonies. The Arcthassians are moving more aggressively, and the Queselan are making strange maneuvers in the subspaces. They're unpredictable. It's like they're planning something big." "Something big," Lucien muttered, his eyes narrowing. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. This had the makings of a galaxy-wide war. The more the factions united, the less Earth's power seemed to hold sway. The unified front of the Assembly may have fallen, but the fight for the galaxy had only just begun. Far from the strategic war rooms of Earth, in a hidden system within the Queselan territories, Jelkra met in secret with her fellow leaders. The gravity of their situation had become even clearer. Earth's dominance had cast a long shadow over every corner of the galaxy, and the alliance between the disparate factions was growing more vital by the hour. "We've calculated Earth's weaknesses," Jelkra said, her voice low, but her words carrying the weight of decisive action. "Their ships are fast, but their logistics are strained. They cannot sustain a prolonged war on multiple fronts. If we can disrupt their supply lines, we can force them to spread their fleet too thin. They'll buckle under the pressure." Altar, a hulking figure from the Arcthassian Empire, gave a grim nod. "The Vorians have already begun to disrupt their communications. We're seeing cracks in their coordination. Earth may have the upper hand in technology, but they lack the cohesion we had under the Assembly. We can exploit that. And we must," Jelkra continued. "We cannot allow humanity to reshape the galaxy according to their whims. If we do not act now, they will consolidate their control, and then it will be too late." Tessa, the Arcthassian commander, stepped forward, her expression set with determination. "We'll hit them where they least expect it. A 3-pronged strike. Quesselan forces in the subspaces, Arcthassians on the outer rim, and Vorians in the heart of their territories. We'll spread them thin and then take the citadel. The room fell into a tense silence as each leader considered the plan. The unity of their forces was fragile, but it was growing stronger by the minute. Together, they could turn the tide. Back aboard the righteous fury, Lucian could feel the pressure mounting. The resistance was not just a distant enemy anymore. Their coordinated efforts were causing significant disruptions in human-controlled space. Earth's fleet had once been unassailable, but now their resources were spread thin, and internal divisions were beginning to show. Rumors of infighting between human factions reached his ears, whispers of distrust about the true cost of this war. "Commander, we've detected an anomaly in the Galactian sector," Kendrick reported sharply. "It's small, but it looks like an enemy fleet assembling." Lucian clenched his fists. "How many ships? Too many for us to ignore. They've been moving in stealth patterns. We believe the Quesselan have mobilized." Lucian's heart sank. The Quesselan had always been unpredictable, their mastery of interdimensional space a wild card. But if they had truly joined forces with the Arcthassians and Vorians in a coordinated strike, it would be the first real test of Earth's newly claimed empire. "We need to prepare for a counteroffensive," Lucian said, his voice a mix of calm and urgency. "Alert the fleet. I want all hands ready for action. We can't afford another failure." But as Lucian gave the orders, a nagging sense of doubt crept into his mind. Earth's fleets were formidable, yes, but they were not invincible. Could they really control the galaxy long-term, especially with these growing pockets of resistance? And more than that, was this what humanity wanted? What was the cost of this war? As the days passed, the situation grew increasingly dire for both sides. The rebellion was no longer a guerrilla movement. It was an uprising that had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The alliance between the Quesselan Arcthassians and Vorians was no longer a theoretical threat. It was a full-blown military campaign. At the same time, President Hargrave's reports became more frantic. The resistance was gathering momentum, with more systems slipping away from Earth's control. His orders grew more desperate. More resources, more reinforcements, more strikes at the heart of the rebellion. But the real question now was not how Earth could hold on to its newfound power. It was how much longer humanity could keep the galaxy together before it shattered into warring factions once again. The rebellion had sparked a fire, and the galaxy was beginning to burn. For Lucian, the thought gnawed at him with every decision he made. Had they gone too far? Would Earth's conquest of the galaxy be remembered as a triumph, or as the catalyst for a new, even bloodier war? The weight of the question was overwhelming, and in the heart of the galaxy, the flames of rebellion continued to rise. The galaxy had become a battlefield unlike any other, a fractured, chaotic expanse, with the human empire at its center, barely holding together. The once mighty righteous fury, flagship of Earth's forces, now seemed like a shadow of its former self. The fleet that had swept through the galaxy's heart was showing signs of wear and fatigue. The rebellion was no longer some distant threat. It was a raging storm sweeping across systems, engulfing everything in its path. Lucian Hale stood on the command deck, staring at the display before him. The once pristine holomap now glowed with red warning lights and flashing alerts. Rebel fleets, coordinated across multiple fronts, were closing in on their remaining strongholds. The Citadel, their ultimate prize, was no longer a symbol of victory. It was a ticking time bomb. The tide of war had shifted. "Commander Hale," Lieutenant Kendrick's voice cut through the silence. "We've received another communication from President Hargrave. The outer colonies, we've lost them. The Vorians have taken control of Typhon 3. The Quesselan have cut off all access to the subspace trade routes. The Arcthassians are attacking from the rear. It's a full collapse." Lucian turned slowly, his eyes hardening. And Earth's response. They're calling for reinforcements, but they're stretched thin. Some of the human factions are even questioning the war now. We've lost support from several colonies that were loyal. The rebellion's influence is spreading faster than we can contain. Lucien's fists clenched. He had known the risks, but this was something else entirely. He had been the face of humanity's rise in the galaxy, its unchallenged conqueror. Yet now, that very rise was unraveling at the seams. There was no longer any question that this war was no longer just about conquest. It was about survival. "We need to act fast," Lucien said, his voice heavy with determination. "Prepare the fleet for a counteroffensive. We'll hit them where it hurts, disable their supply lines, cut off reinforcements. I want the Quesselan fleet isolated." "But, Commander," Kendrick hesitated, "they're already closing in on the Citadel's defense grid. If we lose that, we lose everything." "I know," Lucien replied sharply, "but we can't afford to wait any longer." Meanwhile, in the heart of the rebellion, Jelkra watched with growing satisfaction as the forces of the Quesselan Arcthassians and Vorians closed in on their targets. The strikes were swift, efficient, and devastating. Earth's supply lines were stretched thin, its fleet scattered, and their once imposing military might was now a disjointed force, struggling to keep up with the ever-shifting movements of their enemies. "We've done it," Altar, the Arcthassian commander, said, his voice low with awe. "The human fleet is fragmented. Their forces are too stretched to retaliate effectively. We're on the brink of total victory." Jelkra nodded, but her mind raced. The final push had to come soon. They had to seize the Citadel before Earth could rally its remaining forces. It was the keystone, the nerve center of human control over the galaxy. Without it, Earth would be a fractured, vulnerable shell. With it, they could rule with impunity. But even as they prepared for their final assault, a cold realization gnawed at Jelkra's thoughts. The war was no longer about defeating humanity. It had become about power, a struggle between former allies, and the question of who would control the galaxy's future. She had fought for the independence of the Quesselan, for the survival of her people. But now, the galaxy felt like a tinderbox on the verge of being consumed by its own flames. The final battle for the Citadel erupted with the force of 1,000 storms. Earth's forces, already stretched thin, mounted a desperate defense as the Rebel Alliance descended on the space station like a swarm of locusts. Lucien Hale, aboard the Righteous Fury, was a man possessed. He directed the battle with ruthless precision, his every move calculated to save what was left of his empire. But he could feel it. The tide had already turned. They were fighting a losing battle. "Deploy all fighters," he ordered. "Target their weak points. We can still hold the Citadel." But the truth was, Lucien knew they couldn't. The rebels had anticipated every move. The final push came swiftly, an ambush of overwhelming force, as the rebel fleets cut through the last defenses like a knife through paper. The Righteous Fury shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering, its hull groaning under the weight of the damage. Lucien could hear the sounds of chaos through the communication system, the panicked voices of his crew as they scrambled to keep the ship intact. But it was too late. The Citadel was falling. The heart of human control over the galaxy was slipping away. In the final moments of the battle, Lucien stood at the helm, watching as the rebel fleet closed in on the Citadel. His breath was steady, but his mind was clouded. This was the end of everything he had fought for. His empire, his vision of a united galaxy under Earth's rule, was crumbling. "Commander," Kendrick's voice was quiet, "we can't hold it. It's over." Lucien looked up at the bridge's viewport, watching as explosions lit up the blackness of space. The Citadel's great core, the beating heart of galactic communication, was now under the control of the rebel forces. The final blow had been dealt. He stood there for a long moment, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. He had set out to bring order to the galaxy, but in doing so, he had ignited a conflict that had torn it apart. Humanity had reached too far, too fast, and in the end, it had brought about its own downfall. And yet, amidst the chaos, Lucien found something else, a flicker of hope, a recognition that perhaps the galaxy's fate wasn't in his hands alone. He had failed in one vision, but maybe there could be a new beginning, one forged by those who had resisted, who had fought to restore balance. As the Righteous Fury was overwhelmed and the final embers of the battle faded into silence, Lucien Hale made one last vow. this is not the end. It's just another beginning. The galaxy will rise again. And in that silence, a new order was born, not one of conquest, but of unity forged in the fires of rebellion. The war for the galaxy had ended, but the struggle for its future had only just begun.